out. Appreciate it. You are today the final class of this course, and it will be, you will be saying goodbye to this course. So, yeah, the final will be the next week on Wednesday. Sometime in the week. Yeah. Okay, today we are going to talk about the chemistry of drugs used to treat asthma and COPD. So since Dr. Zhang gave you a good information on pathophysiology, pharmacology, I'm not going to bore you with that again, but I will be giving you a little bit on information pertaining to particular drugs, which I'm going to talk about. Yes? What's the difference between asthma and COPD? And COPD? It's a chronic condition involving, it's more like when we talk about hepatitis of liver and cirrhosis of liver, that's more like it's a chronic condition and it is beyond repairable. As she said, it cannot be reversed. That's what COPD is. And the cellular mechanisms, I'm not going into details here, but it is multiple signals coming from multiple cell types. And therefore, the signals which we have to block to alleviate the problem is multitude signals. So the drugs used to do this is, there are a bunch of them, but I'm going to talk about the ones on red. They are beta, so the oral bronchoconstriction, that is the condition which we have to treat, and we have to use the drugs which can dilate the bronchial blood vessels or bronchial, the lung tissue, etc. So there are bronchodilators and anti-inflammatory agents. So you have choices to treat the conditions either with the bronchodilators or with anti-inflammatory agents, in some cases in combination of both. So we will be talking about the mechanism. When we combine a bronchodilator and an anti-inflammatory agent, what would be the benefits? Is it better? Is it not so good? So those are the things which we are going to talk about. So the list in here, beta-adrenergic agonists, they are bronchodilators, and methylxanthines. One of them is theophylline. It is also a bronchodilator. Then the novel class of bronchodilator I would like to touch based on the magnesium sulfate. Then under anti-inflammatory agents, I'm going to talk about the corticosteroids, and then the modulators, anti-IgE antibodies. Only the last class here, that's the only drug which is a protein in nature. Okay? Some of you came back and asked me ribavarian. I'm going to review those 3 questions at the end of the class. Why someone said ribavarian is a protein, but it is not. So I'm going to talk about, review those 3 questions which the class didn't do so well. So these are the drugs which we will be talking about. Let's go to the bronchodilators. The beta-adrenergic agonist is specifically, let me put it the beta-adrenergic agonist, recall your biochem P1 class. What are these chemicals? The norepinephrine, epinephrines, they came from a compound, a molecule, which you all studied, in particular an amino acid. What amino acid is the precursor for the norepinephrine epinephrines? Anyone? What amino acid will give rise to norepinephrine, epinephrine? Remember dopa, dopamine, norepinephrine, epinephrine, they are all categorized as catecholamines. And what amino acid gives, of the metabolism of which amino acid gives rise to these metabolites?
Tyrosine.
I'm sorry?
Tyrosine.
Tyrosine. That's exactly true. Tyrosine comes from phenylalanine. So either phenylalanine metabolism gives rise to tyrosine, then tyrosine metabolism gives rise to these products. So this is what I would like to, you to remember when you go through this. Okay, what is this chemical? Where did I see it? So hydroxylation. Remember phenylalanine hydroxylase enzyme. Lack of phenylalanine hydroxylase leads to PKU condition. In biochem, we studied that in your P1s. So the epinephrine is produced from tyrosine on hydroxylation. So an additional hydroxyl groups are added, and carboxyl group is removed. Remember that for an amino acid, there should be an alpha carboxyl group and alpha amino group. So here you don't see the carboxylic group. So the decarboxylase removed the carboxylic group, and remaining is the hydroxylated amine, a primary amine, norepinephrine. So that's a natural agonist for the beta-adrenergic receptors in vivo. And so is epinephrine. Epinephrine is methylated, and see the amino group, it's not a primary, it's a secondary amino group. When you convert primary amino group to a secondary, its potency increased. Compared to epinephrine and norepinephrine, which one is the more potent beta-adrenergic agonist? It is epinephrine, because its primary amine is converted to a secondary amine and hard to metabolize. So our enzymes in the system will not be able to deaminate. So that's how epinephrine becomes more potent than norepinephrine. Can we do chemically? So that is the whole idea of making chemically stable molecules of epinephrine, norepinephrine. That way you can prolong these chemicals, stay in the system, and also you can increase their potency to bind to beta-adrenergic receptors. So that's the chemistry here. So there are two places you can manipulate chemically these compounds. One is the secondary amine, the amino group. The other one, there is a hydroxyl group attached to the benzene ring here. One of the hydroxyl group is susceptible for hydroxylases in the system. What is that hydroxylase? Hydroxylase is a transferase, catechol O-methyl transferase. I'm sure you have heard about this enzyme, COMT. So this enzyme converts the hydroxylase group here. Therefore, the compound loses its potency or its ability to bind to beta-adrenergic receptors. So if you block the hydroxyl group or convert it into something else, you can make it stable, withstand the count enzyme activity. That's in blue. Similarly, if you can mask the amino group here, even the secondary amine, then you can increase the ability of these molecules to bind to beta-adrenergic receptors and prolong their activity. So there are two places where you can play around and make the chemically stable compounds. One of them is isoproterenol. In isoproterenol, see the NH group is now there is a methyl group in epinephrine. That methyl group is further methylated by adding two more methyl groups into it, and that makes isoproterenol even more potent than epinephrine or norepinephrine, and it becomes more stable. So in the recent labs pharmacology of beta-adrenergic receptors, the preferred agonist is isoproterenol. Okay. Likewise, in albuterol, what they have done the same methyl group, amino group remains the same, methylated. They also masked the primary hydroxyl group attached to the benzene ring, thereby masking the COMT enzyme activity. So it inhibits the COMT enzyme cannot work on this hydroxyl group. Therefore, you have more stable compound albuterol. These are chemically synthetic compounds. They increase the potency, efficacy of these beta-adrenergic agonists, and the result is more vasodilation or prolonged bronchodilation. That means the patient gets relief for a longer time period. Likewise, they put salmeterol and formoterol. In salmeterol, they added a bulky group to this. It's an alkyl side chain added to the amino, the secondary amine. In formoterol, it is again more bulkier than the salmeterol, and it increases their potency. So if you play around with the amine, the secondary amine, with chemical modifications, you increase the selectivity, potency, and also they increase the absorption of the medication. And it becomes immune to monoamine oxidase. So its premature degradation is prevented by adding bulkier groups into the NH, the secondary amine site. So the whole idea is making stable compounds which can withstand the COMT activity and MAO activity will result in beta-adrenergic agonists which have longer activity, increased potency, and selectivity. Okay? So if I were you, I would be looking into, there are two places where these beta-adrenergic agonists are susceptible for enzyme premature degradation. One is by the COMT enzyme with the hydroxyl group. The other one is MAO, as the name indicates, monoamine oxidase. So the amine oxidation enzyme, if you block their activity by masking the target functional groups, you can make better beta agonists which can prolong their availability, absorption, potency, towards the beta-adrenergic receptors. Therefore, isoproterenol is better than epinephrine or norepinephrine. And albuterol is better than isoproterenol, epinephrine, or norepinephrine. Salmeterol is even better, or salmeterol, formoterol. They are even better than the other albuterol, isoproterenol, epinephrine, and norepinephrine. That's how I will prepare myself for the exam. Any questions? So these are classical, the beta-adrenergic agonists, which you have options to treat either asthma or COPD patients. Next class would be, before that, I'm sure you already have the target site. By activating beta-adrenergic receptors, what are you doing with cellular signaling? These target cells, as I said, there are multiple cells. Epithelial cells, mainly the bronchial epithelial cells. There are fibroblasts, the blood vessel fibroblasts, etc., which contain beta-adrenergic receptors, and they will dilate. How do they dilate? There are the dashed. These are the events which beta-adrenergic receptors increase or decrease. They lower calcium concentration in these epithelial cells. Calcium, intracellular calcium, cytosolic calcium is responsible for contraction. So if you increase if you decrease the cytosolic calcium, how can you decrease the cytosolic calcium? The calcium has to either get out of the cell through a calcium channel, or the cytosolic calcium should be sent into the calcium storage within the cells. The other internal organelles, such as, where do you store in the calcium inside the cell? Which organelle? Pardon me?
What's the question?
Where do you store this calcium in the intercellular organelle? Is it Golgi? Is it mitochondria? Is it? Give me those cytosolic, cellular, subcellular, endoplasmic reticulum. Thank you. So the calcium can be, cytosolic calcium can be lowered by opening the calcium channels in the endoplasmic reticulum membrane. That way, the calcium goes in, gets sequestered in the endoplasmic reticulum. Unless there is an activator which will activate the endoplasmic reticulum membrane receptor, that calcium cannot come to cytosol. What is that receptor? Which receptor brings, activation of which receptor brings back the calcium sequestered in the endoplasmic reticulum? Potassium channel is different. Oh, the calcium channel, but the endoplasmic reticulum has a receptor which actually opens the calcium channel. What is that receptor? What is the agonist for that receptor? IP3 receptors. Remember, IP3 receptors are there on the endoplasmic reticulum membrane, the activation of which by inositol phosphate, IP, the calcium can come back to cytosol. So the beta agonist will lower the cytosolic calcium by opening the intracellular calcium channels on the endoplasmic reticulum by IP3 acid. Remember, here is the signaling pathway. There is cyclic AMP production. So beta adrenergic receptor activation causes cyclic AMP increase or decrease? Increase. It's a stimulatory. Beta adrenergic receptors are stimulatory, they stimulate cyclic AMP, whereas alpha adrenergic receptors are inhibitory, they inhibit the cytosolic, inhibit the cyclic AMP production. So that is, you have already studied with Dr. Zhang. I know she has touched this one. So cyclic AMP will increase the pKa, and the pKa, increased pKa will be activating the calcium activated potassium channels. It will decrease PLC IP3 calcium pathway activity. It will increase sodium calcium exchange. Also it increases sodium calcium ATPase. And so these are the four pathways signals which are relevant for your study, how these beta adrenergic agonists increase vasodilation or bronchial dilation. They lower the calcium concentration by removing calcium from the cytosol, inhibit PLC IP3 pathway, that means phospholipase C activation will cause the IP3 activation. So if you inhibit PLC, then it will inhibit the IP3. So inhibition of IP3 receptor will make the calcium stay back in the intracellular storage, which is in the endoplasmic reticulum. Activation of myosin light chain and phosphatase. So they activate the myosin. Troponin, tropomyosin are the molecules which can trigger the contraction of the blood vessels or the bronchial vessels. So that will contain the dilation. So activating the myosin light chain, it will dilate. Opening large conductance, calcium activated potassium channels. So the calcium activated potassium channels polarize the smooth muscle cells and therefore may stimulate sequestration of calcium into intracellular storages, that is in the endoplasmic reticulum. So these are the pharmacological targets, how the beta agonists cause bronchial dilation or vascular dilation. So how do these methylxanthines or theophylline, for example, help cause bronchial dilation? It causes bronchial dilation in a different pathway other than the beta adrenergic agonist. Methylxanthines, theophylline is an example. There are alkali drugs. They're used as anti-asthmatic, coronary vasodilator, and diuretics. Now, theophylline is a xanthine derivative. Remember the xanthine molecule from purine metabolism. When we studied purine metabolism, xanthine is produced from adenine or guanosine metabolism. And then xanthine oxidase will convert xanthine into hypoxanthine and the other one, the uric acid. Remember that was the for the development of xanthin is here. So the theophylline is related to xanthin nucleotide. The difference is theophylline is methylated in these two NHs. Both N's or nitrogens are methylated, so theophylline can be called dimethylxanthine. Theophylline is a xanthine derivative. So that is a question, chemistry question. So and in particular, it is a dimethylxanthine. There are two methyl groups attached to it. Salts of theophylline or aminotheophylline is an ethylene diamine salt being used to increase solubility to neutral pH. Other theophylline derivatives are there, such as amphophylline, doxophylline. They are substituted at this seventh amino group position here. And what's the advantage? They are found to be more potent bronchodilators without antagonistic effects on adenosine receptors. What's the function of adenosine receptors? You have studied ARBs, adenosine receptor blockers. What do they used for? Where do you use adenosine receptor blockers?
COPD, asthma. COPD and asthma.
In other cases, in vascular diseases, blood pressure control, what do you use? ARB, which ARB would you use? This is all Dr. Oaken's lectures. I'm sure he has covered. Have you studied losartan? How does losartan act? It is one of the ARBs, adenosine receptor blocker. So they inhibit the effects, they do not affect the adenosine receptors. Therefore, the overall blood pressure, they don't interfere with the blood pressure monitoring, but they cause the bronchodilation. Okay? However, patients with severe asthma and COPD, theophylline still remains the most useful drug. So theophylline's activity is different from the beta-adrenergic receptors agonist activity, but still it causes bronchodilation through mechanisms other than the beta-adrenergic receptors. What are the targets for theophylline? It's a non-selective weak phosphodiesterase inhibitor. How does it matter? This phosphodiesterase activity. Where do you see phosphodiesterase activity? Oh, right here. Remember, the cyclic AMP is produced in the bronchodilation. If the cyclic AMP produced, it will not, the cyclic AMP short-lived because there are phosphodiesterase multiple enzymes, PDE. Remember this PDE here, and here is the methylxanthine. Theophylline inhibits PDE-mediated cyclic AMP degradation. So the cyclic AMP stays there for a longer time period. And by doing that, it increases pKa activity. Therefore, pKa will cause all these we talked about, which will cause the bronchodilation. So PD, one of the mechanisms of methylxanthine or theophylline is inhibiting the PD conversion of cyclic AMP to AMP. same mechanism which you may have studied how Viagra works. Viagra also a PDE inhibitor. So what does it inhibit? It inhibits specifically cyclic GMP mediated PDE, phosphodiesterase inhibitor. That's one mechanism. It is an antagonist of adenosine receptor, so it will help. It acts like losartan, bringing the alleviating the blood pressure, reducing blood pressure by dilating. Then the other releases interleukin 10. It is interleukin 10 is an anti-inflammatory mediator or agent. Theophylline also prevents the translocation of pro-inflammatory transcription factor, NF-kappa B, into the nucleus. You may have heard about NF-kappa B in other classes. The function of NF-kappa B is it is in the cytosol. When it is bound to its agonist, the complex moves into the nucleus. In the nucleus, it binds to specific DNA elements or DNA regulatory sites. Thereby, it increases the transcription of other functional proteins. That's how NF-kappa B works. So the theophylline, it prevents NF-kappa B to go into the nucleus. So by inhibiting the NF-kappa B translocation into the nucleus, theophylline helps causes bronchodilation. Now it activates histone deacetylase enzyme. Have you heard of acetylases, deacetylases? What is the function of acetylase?
They're like inflammatory, they produce inflammatory.
Yeah, the mechanism. They acetylate histone proteins in the DNA. That's the biochemistry. Like histones bind to DNA. When histones are bound to DNA replication would not occur. That's how they prevent the DNA from replicating prematurely. Okay. So the initial step is, the acetylase will acetylate the histones. When it acetylates the histones, their basicity gets decreased, therefore they will not be able to attach to DNA which is highly acidic. Okay? So here, deacetylase is an enzyme which will not make acetylation. So it will remove the acetyl group from the histone. Thereby, the DNA will not be replicated, will not be transcribed. So that's another mechanism how theophylline work. So with the above 5 anti-inflammatory effects, low dose theophylline in combination with inhaled corticosteroids may be beneficial for patients with severe asthma and COPD. I'll come back to this combination when we talk about the corticosteroids, the ICSs, inhaled corticosteroids. Okay? So know these mechanisms of theophylline, how it induces bronchodilation. Now a little bit on magnesium sulfate. How does magnesium sulfate causes bronchodilation? It's used in patients with acute to severe asthma. Magnesium sulfate action may involve reducing the cytosolic calcium because both of them are divalent cations. So magnesium sulfate may be, we don't know the exact mechanism, unlike the beta agonist or the theophylline which we looked into. Here it is more of a, some evidence is there. It will compete with calcium, thereby it binds to the calcium protein troponin and the troponin complex. That way, if there is a troponin is not available, then it will not cause any constriction. So that's how the magnesium sulfate interferes with the calcium binding to troponin or tropomyosin. Thereby, magnesium sulfate is found to be a bronchodilator. Now, corticosteroids. As you all know, corticosteroids are better drugs for the treatment of asthma, COPD. How is it? There are different corticosteroids where the hydrocortisone, the beclomethasone, or budesonide, they're all effective systemically, but they cannot be used as inhalers. Remember, inhalers are better, they are more effective. How can you make the inhalers? What's the difference between the typical corticosteroids or the modified ones, like the fluticasone or the triamcinolone? What is the difference? There is a chemical modification involved, and that chemical modification occurs at the 17th position. As you see here, they don't have any, whereas the others, modified ones, have different functional groups added at 17th position. That will make these corticosteroids better inhalers compared to the traditional dexamethasone or the prednisone, etc. Because here is the chemical modifications. Again, natural corticosteroid is cortisol, as you all know. So structural modifications will make derivatives like prednisone, prednisolone, dexamethasone. They have reduced mineralocorticoid function, but increased glucocorticoid function. Okay? And they are effective in asthma when given systemically. So it can be prednisone, prednisolone, dexamethasone, or inhalers, or they are systemic activators, drugs. They are systemically active but not effective inhalers. To make them inhalers, there should be substitution at the 17 alpha position, ester position. That esterification will result in corticosteroids such as beclomethasone or the triamcinolone, budesonide, fluticasone. They are the most effective inhalers. So the functional group modification is at 17 alpha position. That's the chemistry behind making the systemic drugs into inhaler drugs. MOA of these corticosteroids. Remember, corticosteroids, do they need a receptor or a transporter to get into the cell? These corticosteroids. It's biochemistry knowledge from T1. Corticosteroids are lipid soluble, therefore they pass the plasma membrane through passive diffusion. Remember, there are passive diffusion, active diffusion, facilitated diffusion, which you studied, and these corticosteroids they can be going by passive diffusion because they are lipid soluble. And where do they have their receptors? Their target sites, corticosteroid receptors are in the cytosol. So they bind to their receptor in the cytosol, and the complex moves into the nucleus. the corticosteroid bound to the corticosteroid receptor will move into the nucleus, and in the nucleus they bind to regulatory elements in the DNA. Remember those starter box, you study repressor genes, activator genes. So they bind to their site. So one of them is the activator protein site, AP1 site, or the NF-kappa B may mediate the anti-inflammatory effects of corticosteroids. So they may activate the NF-kappa B, and that will bind to the AP1 or NF-kappa B, bind to the DNA elements, and that will stimulate the gene expression, or it may inhibit gene expression. It can be possible. So one of the gene expressions which they stimulate is phospholipase A2 inhibitor gene. Phospholipase A2 inhibitor gene gets expressed, and that will cause what? That will inhibit all the pro-inflammatory mediators generated from arachidonic acid. Phospholipase A2 inhibits the arachidonic acid release from the phospholipids, which you all studied in biochem. I'm sure you may have studied in pharmacology as well. So these are what are the arachidonic acid related metabolites here in asthma and COPD. Which I'm sure Dr. Zhang must have talked about leukotrienes. Remember, these leukotrienes are coming from arachidonic acid through lipoxygenase pathway. I did not go into leukotrienes chemistry because you have already studied them in your previous Bora classes. Okay? So that's what the corticosteroids do. So they will trigger the synthesis of a phospholipase A2 inhibitor gene protein, and that protein binds to phospholipase A2, and it will prevent the leukotriene production. Because phospholipase A2 releases arachidonic acid is metabolized by lipoxygenase, and lipoxygenase products are leukotrienes. And if you block it, corticosteroids, that's what they do. They block the arachidonic acid release by synthesizing more phospholipase A2 inhibitor. Because their action involves the increase or decrease of gene expression, the phospholipase A2 inhibitor is one of them. Then there is another gene expression which I would like to touch here. Corticosteroids increase the expression of beta-2 adrenergic receptors. Remember, if you hit it with a corticosteroid, beta-adrenergic receptors expression will go up in the bronchial tissue, in the lung, resulting in more receptors on the bronchial wall surface, or also in the blood vessel surface. Then what happens? More beta-adrenergic receptors means if there are more beta-adrenergic agonists, you increase the dilation, bronchial dilation. So that's what corticosteroids would do. Now, if you increase beta-adrenergic receptors by corticosteroid, can you add a beta-adrenergic agonist along with the corticosteroid? So if you combine a corticosteroid and a beta-adrenergic agonist, then the result is much more bronchodilation, much more relief. That's what they did in these two drugs, the fluticasone salmeterol aggravator, or the budesonide and formoterol symbicort. That is the combination therapy. Here they combine a corticosteroid and a beta-adrenergic agonist. That way, the corticosteroid increases more beta-adrenergic receptors, and the salmeterol or the formoterol along with the corticosteroid will increase the dilation. So that's why these inhaled Atrovir or Symbicort are more effective because they do increase the bronchodilation by increasing the beta-adrenergic receptors expression. Corticosteroids also inhibit the formation of several inflammatory cytokines that are secreted in asthma T lymphocytes, macrophages, and mast cells. They inhibit the formation. If you inhibit the formation of those cells, they are the one causing the pro-inflammatory agents, which include cytokines, include leukotrienes. So by inhibiting their formation, corticosteroids decrease the production of pro-inflammatory agents. Okay? So now each paragraph will tell you how corticosteroids increase, how corticosteroids increase the bronchodilation, and combination therapy with the corticosteroids and the beta-adrenergic receptor agonist, how it increases the effect. Lastly, about the immunomodulators, these are anti-IgE receptor blockers. One of the examples is omalizumab. When you see this MAB, any chemical, any drug ending with it, MAB, that means it's an antibody. It's an antibody, which is a protein. So the antibodies, how they work, they bind to the antigen. Antibody-antigen combination will nullify the antigen's effect. So it will block the antigen from producing or binding to the receptors or producing the pro-inflammatory mediators. So it is an effective treatment, very targeted, very specific. However, what is the downside? What is the con?
You have to inject it, the system.
Yeah, that is, yeah, you have to infuse. You cannot take it orally. You have to infuse into the system, maybe a day hospitalization. Also the cost, remember, it drives the cost up. So when all of the treatment options fail, you go for this expensive option. Okay? Again, I don't want to go into the details of these cartoons. They are here just to tell you how the monoclonal antibody will block or will bind to the antigens. Thereby, it will nullify the antigen's effect on producing pro-inflammatory mediators. Okay. I think that's all I have. 13 slides. Now, for the exam, they gave me 14 questions for this upcoming exam. Oh. You know what? My modified slide, I have it here. Let me put that one in. Yeah, that's what I had in my presentation. Here it is. Let me insert that. Area for the finals. I have 14 questions out of 14. This lecture, I have 8 questions for for this lecture. Then 6 questions for the previous topics. Previous topics, 2 questions from chemistry. Chemistry of drugs used in GERD, CD, UC, and hepatitis. So 2 questions each. Then out here 8 questions on chemical modifications in making stable modifications we talked about. 1 to block the compactivity, the hydroxyl group masking, and to block the MAO activity by masking the NH2, the amine group in the molecule. So look into the MOA for beta-2A agonist. Chemistry of theophylline. Theophylline is a xanthine, a methylated xanthine derivative. Okay. MOA for magnesium sulfate. Magnesium sulfate interferes with the calcium troponin amino troponin complex formation, thereby it inhibits the calcium induced constriction of bronchial constriction. MOA for corticosteroids. Corticosteroids, they act through multiple target sites. One is they increase or decrease the gene expression by binding to their cytosolic receptors, and they inhibit the pro-inflammatory production by blocking the phospholipase A2 activity for arachidonic acid release and metabolism into lipoids. Then they also increase the beta-adrenergic receptor expression. That will make more beta-adrenergic receptors in the bronchial wall surface. That will, if we have a bronchodilator drug, that will enhance the effect of the corticosteroids. That is what the combination therapy between the corticosteroid and the beta-adrenergic agonist. And what chemical modifications are effective? That is 17 alpha modifications are effective, making the inhalers, corticosteroid inhalers. If there is no, prednisone cannot be an inhaler because there is no 17 alpha modification. What is the biochemical basis for combining these two, which I mentioned, as the corticosteroids induce expression of beta-2 adrenergic receptors. Thereby, if you have a bronchodilator drug along with the corticosteroid, it gives you an enhanced effect by binding to the beta-adrenergic receptors. That's the combination term. So that is the areas where I can give you 8 questions. Now, there are 3 questions which I thought you guys would do better, but I do not see big change. It may be because, at least today I see many of you here, 50% maybe, but the attendance is overall so disappointing that I don't see more than 20 students in this class. So that may be, if you don't come to the class, you miss what I talked about other than what's in the slide, then you depend on somebody else, and it may be construed, my information may be construed. Now let's do this. Which of the following is true about the chemical structure of this compound? I'm sorry, it doesn't show up big. Here, it's talking about tenofovir triphosphate. When you say tenofovir triphosphate, it got to be a nucleotide, right? And is it a pyrimidine? If you look into the base structure, it's not a pyrimidine, it is a purine. Then if you look into, is it a prodrug? No, it is not, because it is the active drug. The prodrug is the dipropyl, remember that big, masking, the chemical modifications that need to be removed to make this is the active drug. Then it contains an incomplete ribose sugar, ribose ring. So look into this, there is no ribose sugar here, so it is an incomplete ribose sugar, that's the right answer. That's the only right answer. Then, does it contain 3' hydroxyl group? There is no ribose ring, there is no 3' hydroxyl group here. That is not true. Only C is the right answer in this. That is, it is a purine nucleoside. It is a purine, but it's not a nucleoside. It is a nucleotide. So I talked about this, the difference between nucleoside and nucleotide in the classroom. But those of you who came into the classroom probably got it right, 45% got answered this question right. Then the next, yeah, I'm sorry, C is the right answer.
But the slide says it's prodrug.
I'm sorry.
But is there only there? I had
Remember, which of the following is true about the chemical structure of the compound? The chemical structure given is a phenopure tripod. So look at the chemical structure and see what applies to the chemical structure. Is it a pyramid? No. Is it a prodrug? No. Does it contain an incomplete ribose sugar? Yes. Then, does it contain 3' hydroxyl group? If it doesn't have a complete ribose sugar, then forget about 3' hydroxyl group. There is no question of 3' hydroxyl group. No. Is it a purine nucleoside? No. The structure given is a purine nucleotide. Okay? Then the next question, which of the following is true about this chemical structure? The chemical structure given was ribavarium. Doesn't have a base. Is it complete or incomplete? Incomplete base. Does it have a ribose sugar?
Yes.
Yes, it does have a ribose sugar. Does it have a 3' hydroxyl group in the ribose sugar? Yes, I'm sorry, here. This has a ribose sugar. So the question asked, is it a nucleotide? There is no phosphate in it. No, it's not. It has an incomplete base structure. Yes, it does. It has an incomplete base structure. That is only true. Then the ribose sugar is modified. No, it's not modified. It is true that ribose. Does it lacks 3' hydroxyl group? No, it has a 3' hydroxyl. It is a pyrimidine analog. We don't know, this is incomplete. It is not a pyrimidine, it is not a purine. So the only true answer is here. It is the ribose sugar is more, it has an incomplete base structure. Then the third question, wanted to draw your attention. Entecavir. Say the structure is a prodrug and contains furanose ring structure. Is it true or false? It's false. So you may have seen other true, then you may pick this one true, but it is false because look at the furanose ring. There is something else in here. I pointed it in my classroom. There is a methylene group is substituted in the furanose ring, and it doesn't have a 3' hydroxyl group intact. Okay.
Dr. Shivchar,
Yes.
that question, when I read it, I was confused because I remember it was a prodrug. I always thought the Tegravir was gonna be replaced with the sacupental.
It's a prodrug and contains furanose ring starch.
So what replaced, what?
It's a prodrug, yes, and contains a furanose ring? No. It doesn't contain a furanose.
Because there's no F.
It is a cyclopentine, pentyl ring. It is not a furanose ring. Prodrug, yes or no? But if you look at this, I gave you structure.
Yeah.
No, but
And
it's
if
cost.
you look into the structure, it
Dr.
doesn't have a
Dr.
furanose.
Shivchar, but can you understand like how one could be thinking? Because
My side,
eh?
out of the final,
Mm-hmm.
out of 14, 8 questions.
Oh, from this one.
From this chapter, on the lecture.
Yeah.
The other 6 coming from the previous exam questions. Third, you see hepatitis.
Can we say 2 questions per?
Yeah, per half.
Okay.
Any other questions? The last time we have an option, ask me if you have any questions.
No, it's okay.
If not, I'll wish you good luck. And
Thank you.
Yes.
Let me see.
Don't make tricky questions.
Yes. Yes, Dr. Shivchar, we love your teaching, but woo, you be acting tricky
Well,
questions.
I want deep learning. You go out there.
You see, we dive deep and we've stirred.
You will be competing with people coming from UT, US. So that's why I'm preparing you to be par with them.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thanks for lending your laptop for it. So it didn't work. It's back.